I noticed the exact moment you stop scrolling and step out onto the porch to look up. You search the sky for one point of light steady enough to hold your eyes still. I have seen you do this after the calls that did not go the way you needed. After a room emptied out and left you standing in a doorway with nowhere particular to be. You tilt your head back. You are not looking for a shooting star. You are not looking for an answer written across the dark. Only for something fixed. Something that is not moving, while everything else in your life keeps moving without asking your permission. Before these words are finished, I want you to understand what you were actually doing out there. It was not idle, and it was not nothing. I have seen the parking lot version of it too, the far edge of a hospital lot at 2 a.m, keys still in your hand, coat not yet buttoned against the cold, your neck bent back the same way while a shift you will not remember the details of finally lets go of you. I have seen you open the little app that names whatever bright thing is hanging low over the tree line. You read the name once, you closed it without feeling any different, for knowing. I have seen the drive out past the last streetlight, on a night you needed somewhere darker than your own house. You pulled onto the shoulder just to sit under a sky with more in it than the one over your driveway. And I saw what crossed your face out there. It was not peace exactly. It was closer to being sized. Small the way a single grain is small against a whole field. You drove home unsure whether that had comforted you or made everything worse. There is a flashlight that lived by your back door for most of your childhood, kept there for storms. You remember the exact weight of it in your hand. The first time the power went out, you were the one sent to find it in the dark. You remember how thin the beam looked against the size of the house? Almost useless until your eyes adjusted. And someone older than you said the thing that stuck. You are not lighting the whole house. Only the next 6 feet. And the next 6 feet is always enough to get you to the 6 feet after that. You have needed that sentence more times as an adult than you needed it that night. And most of the times you needed it, nobody was standing there to say it again. Here is what almost nobody standing near you at any of those moments actually saw. You were counting. Maybe not stars themselves. You gave up counting those somewhere around childhood the way everyone does. But something. The ceiling tiles in a waiting room, 12 across, 9 deep. Memorized without deciding to memorize them. The steps down a hospital corridor, the same 41 steps every time. Counted under your breath like a rosary you never chose. The days since the last real conversation with the person who used to call weekly. The figure in an account you check at night. Not because checking changes it, because counting is the one thing you can still do when everything else is out of your hands. You have built a private arithmetic for surviving a night that will not resolve itself before morning. You never wrote it down anywhere. You did not have to. And underneath the counting sits a conclusion you have never said to a single person, not even to yourself, in full sentences. You looked at how many people are standing under this same sky right now. Every one of them carries some version of what you are carrying, and you did the math the way anyone would. If there are this many of us, all needing roughly the same thing at roughly the same time, then whatever attention exists must be spread thin enough that a person could reasonably be missed, not punished, not singled out for neglect, just overlooked, the way a single light is overlooked in a field of them, the way a name gets lost in a roster too long for anyone to read all the way through. You drew a conclusion out of scale. The bigger the number of people needing to be seen, the smaller the odds that you, specifically, are the one being watched. It sounded like humility when you first thought it. It has been quietly costing you something ever since. I want to slow down here. That conclusion of yours is reasonable in every way, except the one that matters. You reached it the way most private conclusions get reached. Not in a single afternoon of deciding, by watching how the visible world actually runs. A large company cannot know every employee by name. A packed waiting room cannot give each patient the same 40 minutes. A crowded feed cannot linger on any one face for more than a second. Scale, in almost every system you have lived inside, dilutes attention. You learned that honestly, from 100 ordinary places that taught it without meaning harm. And then you did what people do with a lesson that keeps proving itself. You applied it everywhere, including to the one relationship where it was never how anything worked. Some of what convinced you was not even about being forgotten by anyone in particular. It was the sheer weight of numbers, a whole planet of people awake in some time zone or another, most of them carrying a private version of your exact ache, a diagnosis, a debt, a marriage gone quiet, a child who stopped answering. And you, standing in the middle of that enormous crowd, concluded that the math simply does not favor an individual. You have said some version of this to yourself on the porch, on the shoulder of that dark road, in the waiting room with the tiles. There are too many of us for any one of us to be a priority. I'm not going to argue that the math is wrong. I'm going to tell you that math was never how I keep track of anyone. Sit inside an old story with me for a moment. Not as a lesson yet, only as a scene. A man well past the age where new beginnings usually happen was told to go outside his tent at night and look up. Not at a single star, at all of them, everyone visible from where he stood, with the instruction to count them if he was able. He knew before he started that he would not be able to finish. He had spent years doing the same arithmetic you have been doing. He had concluded, from the size of his disappointment, that whatever was promised had likely been meant for someone else. Someone whose story had more room left in it than his did. He was brought outside so the size of the sky could correct the size of his doubt, not by making him feel smaller, by making him watch. Someone claimed to know each of those countless points of light well enough to promise something as personal as a family through them. That man's name was Abram. What happened to him in the dark that night became the pattern for what comes next. But the words you are about to hear were written centuries later by someone else watching the same sky. Tilt your head back now, gently, the same way you do on the porch. If you are somewhere that allows it, let your eyes lift toward wherever the light in the room is actually coming from. A window, a lamp, a crack under a door. Whatever is nearest, not down at whatever screen or list has been holding them. You do not need an actual night sky for what comes next. You only need to remember, while you listen to the next part slowly, that the same eyes that once told a discouraged man to count the uncountable are the eyes reading you right now, whether or not you ever step outside to be looked at. Psalm 147-3-4. He healeth the broken in heart, and bindeth up their wounds. He telleth the number of the stars. He calleth them all by their names. The healing of the broken heart comes first in that sentence, before the stars, not after them, not as an afterthought, once the bigger cosmic business is finished. First, ahead of the counting. The order there is doing more work than the content. Whoever wrote this understood something you have gotten backward in your private arithmetic. I do not get to the wounded heart eventually, once the larger project of managing an entire sky is out of the way. The wounded heart is the first clause. The stars come second, and they come second not because they matter less. The poem wants you to notice that the same attention capable of the first thing is also, without strain, capable of the second. Now look at the verb attached to the stars. It is not the verb you would expect at that scale. He telleth the number of them. A census, a tally. The kind of counting an administrator does to a warehouse of identical units. That alone would have been impressive. But the sentence does not stop there. He calleth them all by their names. Not sorted, not numbered, named. Everyone, individually. The way you name a person, not a population. A census counts. A name recognizes. This verse insists on both happening to the same stars in the same breath. The size of the group was never treated as a reason to stop treating each member like a particular, known, called by name someone. This is where your conclusion breaks. Feel exactly where the break happens. You assume that being one of an uncountable number meant being folded into an average. The way a single vote disappears into a landslide, the way one face is lost in a stadium. But the verse you just heard describes an uncountable number that has not been folded into anything. Every star in that vast field still has its own name. That name is spoken by the same voice that also mends the one broken heart in a quiet room nobody else is watching. Scale did not thin out the attention. Scale only describes how much of it there is to give, not how little is left over for you. I do not want you carrying this as a correction you feel foolish for needing. This was not foolishness. It was a fair conclusion drawn from a world that genuinely does dilute attention as numbers grow. And most days you had no evidence in front of you to suggest I run on a different principle. What I am giving you is not a scolding for the math. It is the missing data point, the one piece of evidence that changes the whole equation. The thing you assumed had to shrink under enough weight has never once shrunk under mine. You learned to count as a child and never really stopped. The kind of counting that has nothing to do with arithmetic and everything to do with staying upright. Counting exits in a room before you can relax in it. Counting how many times a difficult person has hurt you, to decide whether the pattern is real. Counting the years since a person stopped being reachable. Using the number to measure how far gone the relationship has become. That habit did not come from nowhere. It came from a season where counting was the only form of control available. I have never once mistaken your counting for a lack of trust in me. I watched you count your way through nights I was already tracking far more precisely than you were. I was not waiting for you to finish the tally before I started paying attention. The small muscles around your eyes have probably taken on the set of a person on watch. The tight squint of somebody scanning a dark shoreline for a single light. Brow drawn down. Eyes working harder than they were built to. The whole face quietly joined to the search. If yours is set like that right now, let those small muscles go soft. Not by closing your eyes. Only by letting the searching stop for a moment. Breathe once, slowly, while they let go. You are not the one who has to find the light in this. You are the one being found. Let the watch stand down. It was never actually your shift. There is a second thing you have not said, and it sits close to the first one. You have wondered whether being seen by me requires standing out from the crowd you are part of. More devout than everyone else in your church or your family. More consistent in your prayers, more visibly worthy of individual notice than whoever else is awake and aching under the same dark. You have been competing for attention you were never actually competing for. There is no ranking where the more distinguished believer gets called by name first, while everyone else waits inside a general blessing meant for the anonymous majority. The verse does not say he calls the brightest ones by name and lets the dim ones go by number. It says all of them. The faint star at the edge of what a human eye can even register gets the same treatment as the one bright enough to steer a ship by. There's a difference worth naming between a guide and a chart. A chart is useful precisely because it does not know you. It gives the same fixed points to every traveler who consults it. Its value is its impersonality. It works the same for a stranger as it does for you. That sameness is the whole point of a chart. A guide is a different thing entirely. A guide who leads you through unfamiliar dark has to know who you are. He has to know where you, specifically, are trying to go, or the guiding is worthless. You have been treating what I offer like a chart, fixed points anyone could use, generically true for a crowd. No particular relevance to your particular night. The verse you just heard does not describe a chart. It describes a guide who counts the whole field and still knows every member of it by the name that belongs to no one else. Think of the difference between a chart pinned to a wall in a harbor office and a keeper who lives inside the lighthouse. The chart is accurate and impersonal, consulted by hundreds of vessels a year, none of them individually remembered by it. The keeper is different. A keeper who has done the work long enough starts to recognize particular boats by the rhythm of their engines before they ever come into view. He learns which captains cut corners too close. He learns which ones always radio in early out of habit. He keeps a private, unofficial memory that has nothing to do with the log. A chart cannot do that, no matter how many ships consult it. That kind of attention only grows out of knowing someone, one at a time. And it does not thin with use. It is not a resource divided as the harbor gets busier. It is closer to a relationship. It is repeated as many times as there are names to hold, without ever wearing thin from the number of them. You already know the difference between being counted and being named. You have felt it in ordinary rooms. In the big hospital, you were a number on a wristband, read aloud by people checking it against a screen. Accurate, necessary, and nothing about it warm. Then somewhere, a small pharmacy, an old barber, a diner you kept returning to. Somebody said your name before you reached the counter. Nothing else changed about the errand. Everything changed about how it felt to run it. Or go further back, a new teacher reading the roll on the first morning of school, stumbling over your name, getting it wrong in front of everyone. And how different the same name sounded months later in the mouth of someone who actually knew you. The name did not change. The knowing behind it did. That distance between a name read off a list and a name spoken by someone who knows its owner is the exact distance this verse is measuring. I think of the parts of your story you assumed nobody recorded. They happened in rooms too small and too ordinary for anyone official to be watching. A prayer said once, badly, in a car with the engine still running. Never repeated, because you were embarrassed at how little faith was behind it. A decision to stay one more year in a hard situation, for reasons nobody else fully understood, made alone, at a kitchen table, with nobody to witness the cost. A kindness you did for a stranger and never mentioned, not out of humility. There was simply no natural moment, and it slipped out of the week. You filed all of that under things too small to have been noticed. I want to correct the filing. Small and unnoticed are not the same category. You have been treating them as though they were. Here is a memory I want to put in front of you. I think it belongs to more of you than you would guess. A family camping trip, years back. The kind where the adults stayed up after the children were finally asleep in the tents. Someone pointed out a handful of the brighter points overhead. They named the 2 or 3 constellations they remembered from a science class decades earlier, half guessing, laughing at how little they were sure about. Most of what was visible that night went unnamed by anyone in that circle. Nobody present had the knowledge to name it. That gap between what the eye can see and what a person can call by name is the ordinary human condition. It is not mine. Where your knowledge runs out at 3 half-remembered constellations, the naming does not stop. It keeps going, past everything you can identify, into the parts of the field that look to you like undifferentiated static. They are not static to me. I will not ask you to abandon the counting instinct altogether. Some of it has kept you steady through seasons that would have unraveled you without it. What I want you to notice is the specific point where counting turned into a verdict, a quiet decision about your own size relative to everyone else's need. There is a difference between counting your steps down a hallway to keep your feet moving and counting yourself out of consideration because the hallway is full of other people walking it. The first is a coping habit. The second is a doctrine you built without meaning to, and it has been shaping how you pray more than you have realized. The shortened requests, the apologies for taking up space, the assumption that the room in this prayer belongs to someone with a bigger emergency than yours. Bring the whole request then, the unabbreviated one, the version you have been editing down to something that felt appropriately modest, given how many other people also need something right now. You do not need to compete for room in a line that was never shaped like the one you imagine. There is no single beam of attention being rationed out star by star, person by person, until it runs thin somewhere around your turn. What is being poured out behaves closer to the way light itself behaves. One candle does not dim because a second one is lit beside it. A whole sky of them does not leave less light for the one that came last. You have been thinking of attention as a fixed resource, divided thinner as the crowd grows. It behaves nothing like that here. Here is something worth saying about the ones near you who feel invisible in a different way. The caretaker, whose name gets left off the list of people thanked at the end of a hard season. Everyone assumed someone else was checking on her. The co-worker who does the unglamorous parts of a job that never show up in anyone's recap. The friend who shows up early to help set up and leaves before anyone thinks to say the goodbye that matters. You may be one of them. You may know one of them and have never told them what you noticed. Either way, hear this plainly. Being folded into a category, helper, background presence, one of the crowd, has never once meant being folded into an unnamed category by me. Categories are a human filing system, useful for spreadsheets, rarely accurate about a person's actual weight in the world. Tilt your head back once more, briefly wherever you are. The same motion from the porch, the same motion from the parking lot, only this time you are not scanning for anything. Let the tilt itself be the prayer, a body admitting, without a single word, that it knows where to look. Some of what I'm giving you right now has no shape, yet you would recognize as a gift. Only the quiet fact of being known by name inside a field too large for you to have counted on your own. One part of that old story gets skipped too quickly. The man told to count the stars was not a man with a clean record. He carried failures that would have felt disqualifying to anyone doing the kind of math you have been doing about yourself, and none of them were mentioned on the night he was brought outside to look up. The invitation did not wait for his record to improve. It came to a man in the middle of an ordinary, flawed, unresolved life, on a night no more special than any other, simply because it was time for him to hear it. You have been waiting, I think, for some version of your life to feel tidy enough, or significant enough, or separated clearly enough from the enormous number of other people also struggling. Then you would let yourself believe you were being watched with that kind of particularity. There is no threshold like that. There was none for him. There is none for you. The naming does not wait for the counting to stop being embarrassing. Your circumstances may look the same by morning. I know that. The specific thing keeping you up may still be sitting there, unresolved on a schedule you would never have chosen. No date comes attached to what I am telling you. It never did, and I will not invent one just because a date would comfort you in the moment. What is promised plainly is smaller than a date and does not expire the way a date would. You are known by name, inside a scale too vast for you to have measured on your own. And the vastness was never working against you. It was only ever the size of the field your name has been sitting in the whole time, waiting for you to stop assuming it made you harder to find. Maybe you already do a smaller version of this work yourself, without ever calling it that. A dispatcher who can tell which caller is truly in danger by something under the words, something no checklist would catch. A parent at the top of the stairs at an odd hour who knows without checking exactly which creak belongs to which child's door. A guard on a long overnight shift who has learned to tell the ordinary settling of an old building from the one sound that means something. None of them were trained for that in a classroom. It grew the way it always grows, out of knowing someone or something particular for long enough to notice what a stranger walking past would never catch. If you can grow that kind of attention for one hallway, one child, one caller at a time, do not tell yourself I am incapable of holding it for an entire field, all at once, without needing the years of practice you needed. Some of you are hearing this and thinking immediately of a specific person you loved who is gone now. And underneath that grief sits a fear that they have somehow been absorbed into something too large to still hold the particular shape of who they were, a number added to a count. No longer a name spoken by anyone who really knew them. I want to speak to that fear directly, gently. It deserves more than a passing line. Whatever you picture when you imagine a soul lost inside something vast, picture instead the second half of that same verse. The one who calls an entire field of stars by name has never once treated a single life as something that dissolves into scale. Size has never been the enemy of being known here. It only feels that way from where you are standing, counting. And if the counting you do is for somebody else, the doses measured out for a parent, the hours until a child's flight lands, the days a loved one has been in that bed, I see that tally too. It is a different kind of arithmetic. Heavier because you are keeping it on behalf of someone you cannot fix. You have wondered whether that person, so easily reduced to a chart number and a room number, is still being seen as themselves inside the system holding them. Hear this. The one who names stars does not lose a person inside a hospital wing. Their name has not dissolved into their diagnosis, and neither has yours dissolved into your vigil. Look once more at whatever light is nearest you, the way you were asked a while back. Notice this time that you're not searching for it the way you were on the porch or in that parking lot. You already know where it is coming from. That is the entire difference between this hour and every other one you have spent somewhere in the dark, head tilted back, hoping something out there was steady enough to hold your eyes still. It was never the star that needed to hold still. It was you. And you are allowed to. I have watched you count for long enough. Set the tally down. Not because counting was ever a sin, because the number you were trying to reach was never the number that decided whether I knew you. You are not one of a crowd too large to be tracked. You are a name, spoken clearly, inside a field I built and have never once stopped naming, star by star, one of them being you. Amen.